What you call a monastery, we call a Sangvarm, a place of purity. But whoever denies entry to the three poisons and keeps the gates of his senses pure, his body and mind still, inside and outside clean, builds a monastery. Casting statues refers to all practices cultivated by those who seek enlightenment. The Tathagata's sublime form can't be represented by metal. Those who seek enlightenment regard their bodies as the furnace, the dharma as the fire, wisdom as the craftsmanship, and the three sets of precepts and six paramitas as the mold. They smelt and refine the true Buddha nature within themselves and pour it into the mold formed by the rules of discipline. Acting in perfect accordance with the Buddha's teaching, they naturally create a perfect likeness. Me, eternal, sublime body is not subject to conditions or decay. If you seek the truth but don't learn how to make a true likeness, what will you use in its place? And burning incense doesn't mean ordinary material incense but the incense of the intangible dharma which drives filth, filth, ignorance, and evil deeds with its perfume. There are five kinds of such dharma incense. First is the incense of morality, which means renouncing evil and cultivating virtue. Second is the incense of meditation, which means deeply believing in the Mahayana with unwavering resolve. Third is the incense of wisdom, which means contemplating the body and mind inside and out. Fourth is the incense of liberation, which means severing the bonds of ignorance. And fifth is the incense of perfect knowledge, which means being always aware and nowhere obstructed. These five are the most precious kinds of incense and far superior to anything the world has to offer. When the Buddha was in the world, he told his disciples to light such precious incense with the fire of awareness as an offering to the Buddhas of the 10 directions. But people today don't understand the Tathagata's real meaning. They use an ordinary flame to light material incense of sandalwood or frankincense and pray for some future blessing that never comes. For scattering flowers, the same holds true. This refers to speaking the dharma, scattering flowers of virtue in order to benefit others and glorify the real self. These flowers of virtue are those praised by the Buddha. They last forever and never fade. And whoever scatters such flowers reaps infinite blessings If you think the Tathagata meant for people to harm plants by cutting off their flowers, you are wrong. Those who observe the precepts doesn't injure any of the myriad life forms of heaven and earth. If you hurt something by mistake, you suffer for it. But those who intentionally break the precepts by injuring the living for the sake of future blessings suffer even more. How could they let would be blessings turn into sorrows? The eternal lamp represents perfect awareness, likening the illumination of awareness to that of a lamp. Those who seek liberation see their body as the lamp, their mind as its wick, the addition of discipline as its oil, and the power of wisdom as its flame. By lighting this lamp of perfect awareness, they dispel all darkness and delusion, and by passing this dharma on to others, they are able to use one lamp to light thousands of lamps, and because these lamps likewise light countless other lamps, their light lasts forever. Long ago, there was a Buddha named Dipankara or lamplighter. This was the meaning of his name. But fools doesn't understand the metaphors of the Tathagata, persisting in delusions and clinging to the tangible. They light lamps of everyday vegetable oil and think that by illuminating the interiors of buildings they are following the Buddha's teaching. How foolish! The light released by a Buddha from one curl between brows can illuminate countless worlds. An oil lamp is no help. Or do you think otherwise? Practicing all 6 periods of the day and night means constantly cultivating enlightenment among the six senses and preserving in every form of awareness. Never relaxing control over the six senses is what's meant by all 6 periods. As for walking around stupas, the stupa is your body and mind. When your awareness circles your body and mind without stopping, this is called walking around a stupa. The sages of long ago followed this path to nirvana, but people today doesn't understand what this means. Instead of looking inside, they insist on looking outside. They use their material bodies to walk around material stupas, and they keep it keep at it day and night, wearing themselves out in vain and coming no closer to their real self. The same holds true for observing a fast. It is useless unless you understand what this really means. To fast means to regulate your body and mind so that you are not distracted or disturbed. And to observe means to uphold the rules of discipline according to the Dharma. Fasting means guarding against the six attractions on the outside and the on three poisons on the inside, and striving through contemplation to purity your body and mind. Fasting also includes five kinds of food. First, there is delight in the dharma. This is the delight that comes from acting in accordance with the dharma. Second is harmony in meditation. This is the harmony of body and mind that comes from seeking through subject and object. Third is invocation. The invocation of Buddhas with both your mouth and your mind. Fourth is resolution. The resolution to pursue virtue, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down. And fifth is liberation. The liberation of your mind from worldly contaminations. Contamination. These five are the foods of fasting. Unless a person eats these five pure foods, he is wrong to think he is fasting. And once you stop eating the food of delusion, if you touch it again, you break your fast, and you and once you break it, you reap no blessing from it. The world is full of deluded people who don't see this. They indulge their body and mind in all manner of evil. They give free rein to their passions and have no shame. And when they stop eating ordinary food, they call it fasting. How absurd! It is the same with worshipping. You have to understand the meaning and adapt to conditions. Meaning includes action and no action. Whoever understands this follows the dharma. Worship means reverence and humility. It means revering your real self and humbling delusions. If you can wipe out evil desires and harbor good through even harbor good thought, even if nothing shows its worship. Such form is its real form. The Lord wanted worldly people to think of worship as expressing humility and subduing the mind. So he told them to prostrate their bodies to show their reverence, to let the external express the internal, to harmonize essence and form. Those who fail to cultivate the inner meaning, those who fail to cultivate the inner meaning and concentrate instead on the outward expression, never stop indulging in ignorance, hatred, and even while exhausting themselves to no avail. They can deceive others with postures, remain shameless before sages, and vain before mortals, but they'll never escape the wheel. much less achieve any merit. Much less achieve any merit. Student, but the Bathhouse Sutra says by contributing to the bathing of monks, people receive limitless blessings. This would appear to be an instance of external practice achieving merit. This would appear to be an instance of external practice achieving merit. How does this relate to beholding the mind? Here, the bathing of monks doesn't refer to the washing of anything tangible. When the Lord preached the Bathhouse Sutra, he wanted his disciple to remember the dharma of washing. So he used an everyday concern to convey his real meaning, when, which he couched in his explanation of merit from 7 offerings. Of those 7, the first is clear water, second fire, the third soap, the fourth willow catkins, the fifth pure ashes, the sixth ointment, and the seventh the inner garment. He used these 7 to represent 7 other things that cleanse and enhance a person by eliminating the delusion and filth of a poisoned mind. The first of these 7 is morality, which washes away excess just as water washes away dirt. Water washes away dust. Second is wisdom, which penetrates subject and object, just as fire warms water. Third is discrimination. Discrimination would get rid of evil practices, just as soap gets rid of crime. Fourth is honesty, which purges delusions, just as chewing willow catkins purifies the breath. Fifth is true faith, which resolves all doubts, just as rubbing pure ashes on the body prevents illnesses. Sixth is patience, which overcomes resistance and disgrace, just as ointment softens the skin. And seventh is shame, which redresses evil deeds, just as the inner garment covers up an ugly body. These 7 represent the real meaning of the sutra. When he spoke this sutra, the Tathagata was talking to the far-sighted followers of the Mahayana, not to narrow-minded people of dim vision. It is not surprising that people nowadays don't understand. The bathhouse is the body. When you light the fire of wisdom, you warm the pure water of the percepts and bath the true Buddha nature within you. By upholding these 7 practices, you add to your virtue. The monks of that age were perceptive. They understood the Buddha's meaning. They followed his reaching, perfected their virtue, and tasted the fruit of Buddhahood. But people nowadays can't fathom these things. They use ordinary water to wash a physical body and think they are following the sutra, but they are mistaken. Our true Buddha nature has no shape, and dust of affection has no form. How can people use ordinary water to wash an intangible body? It won't work. When will they wake up to clean such a body? You have to behold it. Once impurities and filth arise from desire, they multiply until they cover you inside and out. But if you try to wash this body of yours, you have to scrub until it is nearly gone before it is clean. From this, you should realize that washing something external is not what the Buddha meant. Student, the sutras say that someone who wholeheartedly invokes the Buddha is sure to be reborn in the Western paradise. Since his door leads to Buddhahood, why seek liberation? Why seek liberation in beholding the mind? If you are going to invoke the Buddha, you have to do it right, unless you understand what invoking means. You'll do it wrong, and if you do it wrong, you'll never go anywhere. Buddha means awareness, the awareness of body and mind that prevents evil from arising in either. And to invoke means to call to mind, to call constantly to mind the rules of discipline, and to follow them with all your might. This is what's meant by invoking. Invoking has to do with thought and not with language. If you use a trap to catch fish, once you succeed, you can forget the trap. And if you use language to find meaning, once you find it, you can forget language. To invoke the Buddha's name, you have to understand the dharma of invoking. If it is not present in your mind, your mouth chants an empty name. As long as you are troubled by the prisons, three poisons, or by thoughts of yourself, your deluded mind will keep you from seeing the Buddha, and you'll only waste your effort. Chanting and invoking are worlds apart. Chanting is done with the mouth, invoking is done with the mind. And because invoking comes from the mind, it is called the door to awareness. Chanting is centered in the mouth and appears as sound. If you cling to appearances while searching for meaning, you won't find a thing. Thus, sages of the past cultivated introspection, and not speech. This mind is the source of all virtues, and this mind is the chief of all powers. The eternal bliss of nirvana comes from the mind as at rest. Rebirth in the three realms also comes from the mind. The mind is the door to every world, and the mind is the ford to the other shore. Those who know where the door is don't worry about reaching it. Those who know where the ford is don't worry about crossing it. The people I meet nowadays are superficial. They think of merit as something that has form. They squander their wealth and butcher creatures of land and sea. They foolishly concern themselves with erecting statues and stupas, telling people to pile up lumber and bricks, to paint this blue and that green. They sustain body and mind, injure themselves and mislead others, and they don't know enough to be ashamed. How will they ever become enlightened? They see something tangible and instantly become attached. If you talk to them about formlessness, they sit there dumb and confused, greedy for the small mercies of this world. They remain blind to the great suffering to come. Such disciples wear themselves out in vain, turning from the true to the false. They talk about nothing but future. Blessings. If you can simply concentrate your mind's inner light and behold its outer illumination, you'll dispel the three poisons and drive away the six thieves once and for all, and without effort gain possession of the infinite number of virtues, perfections, and door to the truth, seeing through the mundane and witnessing the sublime is less than an eye blink away. Realization is now. When why worry about gray hair? But the true door is hidden and can't be revealed. I have only touched upon beholding the mind. Thank you. Now this sermon is also complete. Thank you.